I wanted to make a video titled The End Times According to the Prophet Jeremiah. And we see this same, story because the Bible's all one story. It has one message. And this is the same message in all the prophets that there's going to be a time of calamity where God basically he sorts out the uh, the true believers from the unbelievers, which is basically a remnant of people, and he does that through bringing calamity, right? Maybe through exile or some type of destruction, and then what he does is he punishes those nations that you know that that brought the calamity, and then he blesses the remnant. You see it in every book. I've got a lot of videos already about several of the minor prophets, but we'll do this in Jeremiah, and I'll just start in chapter 23 now. A lot of this is applicable to the time of Jeremiah, but it also speaks about the end times as well. It talks about the day of the Lord, and it's a theme. The day of the Lord was, it was a time then, such as in the book of Jeremiah, when Babylon was going to come and you know, take Israel into exile, but it pointed to the end times as well. So in chapter 23, it starts off with, or in verse 5, it says, "Behold, the days come that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment, justice in the earth." So this is a king from the line of David. This is the Messiah that's going to execute judgment and justice in the entire earth, not just in Israel. This is going to be worldwide. That's the Messiah. In his days, Judah's going to be saved. Israel's going to dwell safely. Um, they shall no more say, "The Lord liveth, which brought the children out of Egypt," but the Lord liveth, which brought the children out of the north country and from all the countries whither I had driven them. So this is going to be a final restoration when they all come back. This is when, as Christians, we believe this is when Jesus returns. And so you just kind of keep scrolling. Again, some of this is applicable to the days of Jeremiah, but this is going to be the end times as well. This is going to be the final. This is going to be the final restoration. Then they'll never leave the land again. The final restoration of Israel to the land and the destruction of their enemies. And basically, if you can see why if you go to verse 10, the land is full of adulterers, swearing. It's full of adulterers, full of evil. That's why God has to judge it. They're serving false gods, prophesying false dreams. Um, Go on to uh, chapters 24. It's uh, they're going to be carried away, but there's going to be a restoration. That's always the promise. Israel is not ever going to be entirely destroyed. It's just separating, the good from the bad. And then if you go to chapter 20, well, yeah, chapter 25, it talks about, hey, there's going to be captivity, 70 years of captivity. So we saw there's going to be a righteous branch, but when is that going to come? Well, there's going to be 70 years of captivity. It's going to be, not good. And then God's going to punish the king of Babylon, because of what they did. Even though God brought Babylon to punish Israel, God's going to punish Babylon for punishing Israel. Basically because they were proud of it. They exalted themselves for it instead of, they probably could have got away with it if they would have just said, "Hey, we did what you asked us to do," and they weren't evil towards Israel, but they just executed God's justice. Maybe they would have got away with it, but then they were oppressive and evil towards Israel when they did it, And so God says, all right, well, now I'm going to punish you. And here's the theme that we really see in the end times. In chapter 25, verse 15, he tells Jeremiah, take the wine cup of this fury and cause all the nations to whom I send thee to drink it. So Israel in the end times is going to become uh, basically a cup of wine that all the nations get drunk off of. They rage at Israel. You know, why? Why this little tiny country in the Middle East? Why are all the nations raging at Israel? Why do they do that currently? Just because they're drinking the wine cup. You know, it's to make them drunken, and they're going to be punished. They're all supposed to drink it, and then it starts talking about the nations that are going to be punished. It starts with Egypt in verse 19, the the Philistines, verse 20, Edom and Moab, that's Jordan, Tyre and Zidon, that's Lebanon, Dedan, Tema, Booz, that's verse 23 and 24, that's Arabia. Uh, Elam, verse 25, that's Iran. The north country, that's Babylon, Assyria, you know, probably places like Afghanistan, countries like that, you know, even maybe Russia and China. Um, so all these nations, God's going to punish. And, you know, the Lord's going to roar. He's going to He's going to bring judgment on them for what they've done to Israel. Verse 33 in chapter 25, the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth even unto the other. They shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried. It's God's going to punish them for what they did, and the remnant of Israel is going to survive. You know, you go on to verse 31 or chapter 30. There's a promise to return to the land, you see, and then there's the time of Jacob's trouble. uh, Wherefore do I see every man with his hand on his loins as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness? Alas, for that day is great, there is none like it. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. So it's just kind of summarizing everything that's going to be going on. You know, it's going to be a bad time. But then verse 10, you know, I will save thee from afar, from the land of thy captivity. So it's basically just kind of bringing some good news with the bad. Hey, it's going to be bad, but I'm also going to save thee. And then you start in verse 16, and then he's going to destroy their enemies. This is kind of summarizing what it's already said, but it's just kind of bringing hope to them as well. Because if you just say a bunch of bad news, well, it's, you know, you got to bring some good with the bad. And then verse 18, Jerusalem's going to be rebuilt. I will bring again the captivity of Jacob's tents and have mercy on his dwelling places. And out of them shall proceed thanksgiving, the voice of them that make merry, and I will multiply them. They shall not be a few, and I will glorify them. They shall not be small. And I will punish all that oppress them. So there's going to be calamity, but then there's going to be hope. You get to, and how's this going to happen? You get to chapter 31. There's going to be the new covenant. They're going to recognize the Messiah. They're going to enter into the new covenant, right? And that's going to be the redemption of Israel. And they're going to rejoice over it. You see in chapter 31, it's going to be a time of rejoicing. Yeah. chapter 31, verse 31, the new covenant with the house of Israel, not according to the covenant that I made out of Egypt, not the law of Moses. This is the new covenant. The city's going to be built again. So it's a destruction and then a restoration. You see in verse 36 of chapter 32, you're going to be delivered from your enemies. It's always this. It's the same story throughout the Bible. Verse 30 or chapter 33, verse 15. In those days and at that time. So this is talking about the end time. Will I cause the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. In those days shall Judah be saved, Jerusalem shall dwell safely. Right? So this is the end game of it. It's going to be calamity. They're going to have exile. They're going to have enemies in their gates, and because all these nations are going to be drunk over Israel, they're going to, for no logical reason, they're going to want to fight Israel and take them exile, and then this, the return of the Messiah is when God's going to punish those nations, and he's going to save the remnant, and he's going to return and restore them forever. They're going to be back on their land and never removed again. And yeah, that's from basically chapters 23 to 33, and that's basically the end times according to the book of Jeremiah and the rest of the book. They all say the same thing. All the books say the same thing. That's what's going to take place. Calamity from nations that are drunk, raging over Israel. Those nations get punished for what they did. But this happened a few times in the Bible. There's going to be a final time that it happens when God punishes all the nations, brings the remnant of Israel back to the land. They're never going to be uprooted again. And that final time is when the Messiah returns. The branch of David, the righteous branch of David. And that's the final time. It'll never happen again. And that time is coming soon. So just wanted to make a video about that. I'll make a video probably on Isaiah next. I've already made pretty much all of the minor prophets. But yeah, it's good to see, God doesn't change. It's the same story throughout the Bible. So thanks for watching.